The wheels of the Seattle to Vancouver bus hissed as we eased into the border checkpoint, and for a moment, the cabin fell into that strange hush you only hear when everyone is quietly realizing their life is about to tilt, even if only a few degrees. I pressed my forehead to the window, watching the American flag fade behind us and the Canadian one appear ahead. Same colors, same familiar flutter, yet something in the air shifted. Like stepping from a noisy hallway into a library, crossing the line felt oddly anticlimactic. No dramatic announcement, no ceremony. Just a bilingual sign that read "Welcome Benvenue," and suddenly the road markings looked cleaner, almost deliberate. The officer who checked my passport smiled with an easy warmth that made me instinctively brace for the punchline. None came. He asked how long I was staying, handed back my passport with a soft "all right then, enjoy your time here," and waved us through. A simple gesture, but the gentleness in it made me pause. Back home, official interactions usually carried an edge, a pace, a pressure, an urgency. Here it felt like someone had turned the volume down. When the bus rolled into downtown Vancouver, the first jolt hit me. People walked slowly, like the entire city moved with a rhythm I hadn't learned yet. No frantic weaving through crowds, no echo of clipped conversations or hurried phone calls. Even the cyclists looked relaxed, coasting with that effortless confidence of people who trust their environment more than I trusted mine. I stepped off the bus and the cold air wrapped around me, sharp but strangely clean, tinged with the smell of rain and cedar. A man in a red jacket brushed past, muttered sorry even though he'd barely touched me, and kept walking. I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard him. Then I saw another pair of strangers exchange a quiet sorry dance after nearly colliding at a crosswalk. The whole scene felt like a polite choreography I'd stumbled into without rehearsal, but the moment that really sent my mind spinning happened outside a small coffee shop. A woman left her laptop on a patio table completely unattended while she went inside to refill her cup. I looked around, waiting for someone to grab it. No one even glanced at it. People just kept chatting, sipping their coffees, living in a version of public space that didn't operate on the same defensive instincts I carried from the States. Standing there on that damp sidewalk, backpack still slung over one shoulder, I felt the ground shift under my assumptions. Canada wasn't home, but it wasn't foreign either. It was something in between, a familiar landscape with a different emotional climate. A place that looked like the us but behaved like it had quietly rewritten the rules of everyday life. And in that first hour, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit yet. This country was going to change the way I moved through the world. Whether I meant for it to or not, daily life in Vancouver unfolded like a slow unspooling of habits I didn't know I had. Each morning, I walked the short stretch from my sublet to the SkyTrain. And every time I stepped onto the platform, I braced for the push, the subtle jostle of commuters fighting for position like in every American city I'd lived in. But it never came. People spaced themselves out with a quiet, almost unconscious courtesy, leaving small pockets of breathing room. They queued in loose lines instead of swarming doors. And no one sighed dramatically if someone hesitated. The absence of tension was so noticeable it pinged like an echo. One morning, I accidentally tapped my transit card twice and froze, expecting the usual eye rolls or a curt move from behind. Instead, the man behind me waited patiently, nodded as if to say it happens to all of us, and stepped forward with a soft "all good." That tiny moment landed heavier than it should have. I realized how prepared I was for impatience, how much of my day, back home, I spent anticipating small battles no one here seemed interested in fighting. At work, the cultural dissonance deepened. I joined a small tech team downtown, expecting the same sly competitiveness and subtle hierarchy I'd grown used to in Seattle. Instead, the first thing my manager told me was, "Take your breaks seriously. And when you log off, actually log off." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. At PM sharp, my co-workers vanished, not with excuses or apologies, but with backpacks and cheerful waves. No one hovered to impress anyone. No one lingered to show dedication. It was as if the entire office believed your life outside the building mattered more than anything inside it. The first Friday, they invited me to a brewery on Main Street. I expected the usual American social script, some friendly chatter followed by subtle probing about my background, my goals, where I saw myself in 5 years. But the conversation drifted to weekend hikes, a new bakery one of them loved, and which neighborhoods had the best community gardens. No one asked what I earned. No one flexed their job title. It felt almost disorienting, like trying to dance to a rhythm that kept shifting under my feet, but the hardest moment came 2 weeks in, on a gray afternoon when the rain had settled into a steady curtain. I stood at a crosswalk, hood pulled low, waiting for the light. A car slowed to a stop, not to turn, not to merge, but just to let me pass. The driver lifted a hand in a little wave. Behind her, no one honked. No one craned their neck in annoyance. They simply waited, calm and unbothered. I stepped across, but halfway through the intersection, something tight in my chest eased. It was such a tiny gesture, almost laughably small. And yet, in that moment, I realized how much of my American life had been defined by a low-grade sense of competition on the road, in lines, in stores, at work. Here, the competition wasn't missing. It simply wasn't the default setting. That afternoon, walking back to my apartment with rain pooling at the edges of my sleeves, I felt a strange mix of gratitude and discomfort. Gratitude for the ease of it all. Discomfort because ease was something I wasn't sure I trusted yet, and somewhere between those two feelings, a deeper question stirred: was I adapting to Canada? Or was Canada quietly reshaping the parts of me I'd spent years learning to protect? The moment I realized Canada had quietly reshaped me came on an ordinary walk home. It was late, the air cool and still, and somewhere halfway down my block, I noticed I wasn't doing any of the things I used to do automatically in the States. No checking behind me, no tightening my grip on my keys, no speeding up my steps. I was simply walking, listening to the rain tick against the leaves, moving through the night without that familiar layer of tension. It startled me enough to stop under a street lamp and take a breath, wondering when exactly my instincts had changed. It wasn't a single event. It was everything: neighbors who greeted me with that gentle, almost effortless warmth, coworkers who actually encouraged evenings free of email, strangers who stepped aside with a soft sorry instead of charging ahead. All those tiny interactions had added up, shifting the baseline of how I moved through the world. I found myself becoming quieter inside, less defensive, less quick to brace for the worst, but the transformation wasn't one-sided. Living here also sharpened what I missed about the spark, the boldness, the big energy behind conversations and ambitions. I missed that electric feeling of possibility Americans carry in their bones. At the same time, I loved how Canada valued presence over pressure, how the pace slowed enough for you to notice your own thoughts, how people treated community as an everyday responsibility rather than an abstract idea. By spring, I'd begun to understand the balance. America made me fast. Canada taught me to breathe. Neither canceled the other out. They simply revealed different parts of me, like switching between two languages you secretly know by heart. On my last morning before a short trip home, I stood at a familiar crosswalk. A car approached, slowed, and stopped with that gentle wave I'd come to recognize. As I crossed, I lifted my hand in thanks without thinking. And it struck me this place had eased something I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years. Canada didn't ask me to become someone new. It just reminded me there were other ways to live, to move, to trust. And as I walked toward the SkyTrain, I knew that even when I crossed back into the States, a part of this quieter rhythm would stay with me, reshaping how I saw both countries and myself.